comments?
Lots of interesting ideas. I enjoyed it. But yeah, the last questions, of course, are the most difficult ones.
Sorry, the last question?
The last questions are the most difficult ones.
Yeah, they're difficult to answer, of course. I think they're, at the moment, they might all they might be is fun to think about. Interesting things to contemplate. But I guess the things that I think are predictable are how our institutions are going to change in the next 10, 20, 30 years. I think it's kind of predictable the direction they're going in. Some of the pressures that are on them right now and some of our collective frustrations with them, I think, indicate what we want them to become, and also what the internet thinks of them is important. The internet thinks things, the internet collectively thinks things, and we can say what the internet thinks of political institutions, we can say what the internet thinks of religious institutions, we can say what the internet thinks of scientific institutions.
I think you're a little bit too quick there that the internet does not have one particular opinion. There are extremely different opinions on the internet,
right,
and they tend to reinforce each other by communicating with like-minded people, and there you have a risk of having subcultures that are really very disagreeing.
I'll give you an example though, like again with the Reddit and YouTube front pages. So for example, if you upload, say there's the top theologian, like if one exists. Yeah, like I'm just say example. A top theologian records himself for an hour talking about his thoughts on the universe and uploads this to YouTube. He's gonna have a very hard time getting upvotes. He's just gonna get downvoted, and he's gonna have to disable the comments because he's gonna get made fun of. And YouTube's not just like a place where you can just isolate yourself in sub-communities. Same with Reddit. Like if he posts that video to Reddit, he's just going to get downvoted. It doesn't even matter where he puts the video. The internet feels something about these.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the YouTube that you know is necessarily representative of the whole world. I'm pretty sure that
it's not. It's
Arabic
not. No.
and Chinese internets that might make very different worlds.
Right. Yeah. No, it's not representative of the whole internet, but it represents a significant portion of the demographic group that's going to be culturally dominant in the coming generation.
I hope so. I would just say you have to be careful about that. The internet is also being adopted by reactionary conservative groups with very close-minded views.
The key is though that it's being that they're sort of manufacturing that. It's not the natural reaction of the community of people on the internet. So like if you just go to Reddit on any given day, they're against the NSA, for example, or they're against.
That's what you would expect from a culture that's about free information exchange. They would be against kind of a Big Brother type.
I guess I'm assuming that type of medium for communication is the future. And so we can be sort of, like I would be concerned if the Reddit community was all for the NSA, right? Then I would...
I'm sure there's a very thriving creationist community saying all kinds of most irrational things about evolutionary theory and the internet.
Of course, but they have to isolate themselves on their creationist websites. They're not going to be on the multi-platform sites that are free for everyone on the globe to participate in. I'm very optimistic with these things. I'm just saying the dominant...
I'm pretty sure if you look in YouTube for creationist videos, you will see all kinds of links to other creationist videos.
You will, and
there will be a community that's self-reinforcing.
But you'll see something that's interesting with creationist videos on YouTube. You won't find one that has more than half of the like-dislike bar in their favor. And you won't see a creationist video that can leave their comments enabled and not just have to deal with
on the other hand,
constant ridicule.
Richard Dawkins will also get a lot of dislike from creationist people.
We could go and compare Richard Dawkins and creationist videos now. Richard Dawkins videos are you can hardly even see the dislike bar.
Yeah.
Like you can hardly even see it. All of his videos, they're overwhelmingly celebrated. We can go and we can do the test.
I hope you are right, but I mean, just recently an acquaintance of mine sent me a creationist video in which a guy interviews some people at the university and asks them all kind of difficult questions like, was there a first human, and what about this, and all the kind of questions that creationists have difficulties with. And he has kind of very neatly cut all the hesitations out, and then they look as if people at university don't know how to answer these difficult questions that creationists like. How could, if a cat always has a cat as a child, how could it ever evolve into something else? You know, the typical.
Yeah.
These kind of videos, and he must have did it with students in engineering who have never even thought about evolution. He has found one or two professors who kind of hesitating or said something garbled. Of course, it's a very cheap trick to just edit out everything that sounds confused by people, put it together, and then make it look as if scientists can't answer the question of creation.
But let's take some of the examples you were giving in the paper you're writing with the Return to Eden. Like if we do find ourselves in a world where the information transfer rate is massively superior to the one we're currently in, there are certain memes that are going to thrive in that type of system, and there are certain memes that aren't. There are certain memes that need to survive in a system where information is restricted, right? Like with these cheap tricks, right? If you can't do those cheap tricks, also if you can't congregate in one institutional center every week and continually surround yourself in a little religious bubble, the whole thing's gonna collapse. The whole enterprise is gonna collapse.
You can easily isolate yourself in a communicative bubble in the internet by going to a forum where there are only creationists.
Sure. What I think is going to happen is if I'm right in my assertion that religious institutions are just going to, for the most part, lose their function, that I think what you're going to get is pastors and priests or rabbis or any religious leader that has a significant amount of money to just form what I would call like a Westboro Baptist Church like organization, like Westboro Baptist Church. They're more radical a religious group than even religious fundamentalist groups in America. They're probably as radical as you can get, protesting outside of, dead soldiers' funerals and stuff like that with the God hates fag signs and stuff like that. And they barricade themselves in their home. Like they're just this little family organization in their home. I think that's what the people who remain religious will have to do something like that. Will like form in a little isolated community.
I wish you were right, but it's not yet like that. For example, in the Islamic world, you have a rich guy who calls himself Harun Yahya, and who writes books where he proves that evolution cannot work, and these are very nicely illustrated books with lots of pictures, and there are probably animations on the internet, and they are sold for free to all kind of people all around the world. It's probably there are some rich Saudi Arabians behind it, and in lots of Islamic communities they get those books for free, and they look very serious and very nice and very scientific, and they accept that.
Right, but I'm saying this transition is going to happen in the 2040s. I'm saying that the things I'm trying to describe are things that will have to happen
I more agree with you. What I'm saying is that in the longer term, good memes should win against bad memes. But in the shorter term, bad memes can play some pretty nasty tricks of self-reinforcement that...
I guess, of course, sorry.
I would like to say something, because I heard on another talk last year, you said our mind is energy saving. That means that if we have a shortcut, we will use it, because we don't want to spend energy thinking about it. And that's a human nature. So I agree with you, and I would love to think that everybody would love to know everything. But I know a lot of kids that doesn't want to study. They just don't care. So that kind of people will be the potential followers of those tricky marketeers, religious, whatever.
Sure. I guess so. I guess another point I want to make is that it's something Sam Harris always says, that take for example these kids that you say don't have any inclination to learn, don't want to learn anything. They still couldn't go on a first date and say I believe in Zeus. Like, I believe in Zeus. Like, they would pay a social cost to believing in Zeus, that the girl would probably, or the guy would think, you're crazy. Like, I'm not going to see you again. It will get to the point where the only thing religious people have in their favor is the sheer number of subscribers they have. It should be sort of like an exponential drop-off. Like, at some point, when a certain number of the population is atheist, or it doesn't matter if you're atheist, if a certain number of the population just doesn't think about religion, they don't go to the religious centers, then going to the religious center starts to seem weird. It's the only difference between a religion and a cult is just the number of subscribers.
It doesn't matter if it's religion or any other thing that have followers based on non-factual things or non-reasonable. Somebody that's guiding them for his own purpose or whatever. I think it will be hard just to eradicate that. And yes, through openness and everything, if everybody knows about it, you are seen like as weird, and you are a little bit forced to do it the other way. But we have to be careful not to have bubbles that grow on
isolated source for
I think there will be bubbles. Oh, there'll for sure be bubbles. Like I'm saying.
Only that some of these bubbles are as big as the Arabic world almost.
That's a problem.
If I'm right that these metasystem transitions do restructure, they act as mechanisms to restructure society, we can predict some general things about what that restructuring will look like when we have more energy and when we have more information. Like the reason the Arabic world looks like a big bubble right now, I mean, it's for cultural and historical reasons. I mean, Europe would be a big bubble if it had been the reverse. Like if European colonialism hadn't happened and instead it was Arabic colonialism, that the Arabs had colonized the rest of the world and the Europeans hadn't. The Europeans would be in a bubble right now. They would be clinging to Christendom, right? And it would be the reverse situation. I feel like the Arabics or the amount of religious belief in the Arab tradition right now is for fear of losing their culture, for the most part. Like, if I stop being Muslim, then I'm becoming Western, in a sense.
Well, there is also, I think, the specificity of Islamic religion that permeates everyday life very much. So, in a way, they are very right to fear that.
Right.
Because it's so intertwined in everyday life, unlike, let's say, typical Catholicism, where nowadays people in the best case go to the mass. If they are very, very strict once a week, they don't pray 5 times a day, they don't do, I mean, it's simply a difference of religion. Actually, can I make two points? Sure. Very interesting remark by Clément. Actually, that refers a little bit to the remark that we heard now about all the information being out there, like be it in the cells or be it on the internet. It's all actually the information, it's all the potential for knowledge that is there. Because that's what the information, be it in DNA form or as knowledge and facts and whatever on the net, it's the potential for knowledge. The information in se is not knowledge.
Right.
So the potential is there. And if I heard you right, what you say is that there are groups of people that, let's say, don't care about that potential. It's okay that that potential is there, but I don't care to learn about it. And actually that is, I very much sympathize with that view. In schools, they are constantly encountering it, and they are speaking in Dutch, they speak about the kansarmen. These are people that have actually the information at their fingertips, but they in a way choose not to use it because they know better, they don't know better.
Yeah, that's true,
In that respect, I find it like in the human body. You have all the DNA, let's say, in every cell, but not every cell, luckily, turns out to develop into a nose. I don't know, that would be weird. In the same way, I mean, all the info that is out there, might not materialize, let's say, on a higher level, like.
Yeah, it's. I think my assumption here is, because I agree, but my assumption here is that you're going to be dealing with. I mean, I'm sure we would call them human, but they're going to be entities where their brains are actually deeply connected to the internet. They're not going to be biological humans in the same sense. They're going to be more merged with their technology, and they'll probably be able to consume information in ways much more like a computer while still retaining human qualities that computers have trouble mimicking in that sense. So like everyone will just have the information sort of thing.
I love your
You'll just be able to. I'm very optimistic.
He's saying that
Yeah.
lots of people, given the chance, will not take the chance.
Because it requires effort to read the book. You have to actually read. I'm saying we're going to be dealing with entities that don't have to read the book. You can just download.
You mean that it wouldn't cost any effort?
It's no effort. You just have the information.
Well, until we get there.
This is 2050s, 2060s, deeper.
But I'm thinking about a much more practical solution right now. That's what I have called in my paper mobilization systems.
Yeah.
These are methods to make learning such fun that you don't want to stop doing it. And I have seen education nowadays. It is much more fun than it was in my days, and it will become even much more fun. And the kids, like you can ask Mia, they are playing games on the internet to learn French or to learn mathematics, and it's like a game.
And Khan Academy just rolled out something like this.
For example.
So, like Khan Academy has, the Khan Academy actually now looks like a social network.
Yes.
They've got followers, they've got points, they've got reward systems, they've got friends.
Well,
right?
I played sometimes
Right.
out of interest, yes.
There are lots of interesting mechanisms that are emerging by the internet that can make learning more fun. Of course, there are going to be people who just say, I don't want to learn calculus. There are going to be people who say, I don't want to learn anything about evolution. Of course, there are going to be those people. But I feel like the collective of humanity will be much more intelligent. We'll all be much more educated. I think it will be something like you're saying in the 2040s where most people will have an advanced degree, or the equivalent of an advanced degree. It might not be a master's or a PhD, but they'll have some sort of specialized knowledge. Everyone will have some sort of specialized knowledge. You'll have to. There'll be no other way to compete.
Another reason for me to be optimistic in the longer term is that there is simply natural selection. If you have two groups, suppose that the Arabic group or the Islamic group decides to completely cut off contact with the West and to develop their own internet, their own worldview, their own knowledge, their own science. Which one of the two do you think will do best economically, politically, etc.? It's pretty obvious.
Yes.
There has been a famous Arab development report written for the United Nations by a number of Arab scholars, so unbiased source, that came to the conclusion that over the last 20 years or so, the Arab world has been developing much more slowly than all the rest of the world. And they gave the reasons, and the reasons were basically culture, like the fact that not much emphasis was put on education, there was no democracy, women had no rights, etc.
And this is
Those things keep you back indeed.
Of course, and the same thing can be. This is not just a problem for the Arab world. This is a problem for example, the Republican Party in America. A similar report came up with that you described, where Republicans came up and did a census of why certain demographics aren't voting for Republicans, i.e., all non-white men. Right, and the report was about stop discriminating against gays, stop discriminating against Latinos, stop discriminating against women, and it's holding you back. So there are views in which will be successful, and there are views that won't be successful. There'll be views that will be selected away, and there'll be views that are incredibly successful. And we can predict what views will be most successful.
I mean, in the end, what the difference between evolutionary theory and creationism is that with creationism you can't do anything. With evolutionary theory you can predict and explain all kinds of things, apply it in medicine, apply it in psychology, apply it in computer science, apply it everywhere. It's incredibly useful. Creationism, it's a story.
And ironically, it will be naturally selected away.
Yeah.
But it will take
a long time.
But okay, so let's imagine, for example, I mean, we're talking about a higher distributed intelligence emerging, right? Like, and in the not too distant future, right? Like, in this world, certain ideas will be untenable, right? Like for example, in the 15th century, it would be an acceptable opinion that if you stole a loaf of bread, you could perhaps be beheaded. Like this would be an acceptable form of punishment. If I believed that in this system, you would think me barbaric. I mean, it's just an idea that I could have, but I can't really have it and be taken serious. In the same sense, in the next transition, there'll be ideas that might be passable right now that just can't exist, and you just laugh at them. Or, and think about this as well, like, language is a great communication tool, like spoken language, being able to communicate my thoughts to a large number of people. But it's not the most efficient type of communication that could exist. More efficient type of communication could exist, and it probably will exist in the 2050s, where everyone's on the internet all the time in their brains and communicating in a much more efficient way and communicating more information quicker, and sharing information just more faithfully, I suppose. Like, I'm sure the thoughts and my ideas in my head about this are more clear to me than I was able to articulate, for example.
I think that's a very important but underestimated aspect. And it's not a question of, let's say, science fiction technologies, it's a question of developing new conceptual and representational schemes. It's something I have been thinking about on and off. It's not trivial to do it, but it can be done and it could make a big difference.
I think so. I think a lot of the time some of the problems in these debates that seem to be never ending about science and religion or about civil rights or about a whole number of different things just come from spoken language's inability for two agents to communicate in as effective way as possible. Sometimes people are misheard or misspoke or didn't communicate their idea as well as it's formulated in their mind. And this can cause some conflict sometimes.
Yeah, it's another question, but about the idea of transportation, so you argue that the trend will be that we'll have a global transportation system.
Yeah.
And so what would you say about these ideas of virtualization, that everything will be on the web, so we won't need to transport anymore?
Yeah,
it seems to...
Yeah, I thought about that as well, like if that just negates the possibility of a real global transportation grid emerging, will that just become irrelevant? But I think we'll still need to, unless we have teleportation, we're still going to need to get resources. We're not going to have teleportation, I don't think, but I mean, that's what it would take to stop the emergence of a new transportation grid, really, because I mean, we could all be virtually here, like instead of you flying me in, I could have just appeared here virtually and it could have maybe just been the same type of experience. But I still doubt that people will still want to go to a certain place, or we might still need to move resources around the planet with a transportation grid of some kind. That can't be done virtually. There are still things where we'll need a transportation grid. We might use it in different ways, but we'll have the energy with which to make at least our continental grids better. Like, even if a new intercontinental mechanism doesn't emerge, the continental mechanisms are already described theoretically, and the energy with which to do them is solar. So these things will probably materialize anyway. The degree
I like that idea of the tubes, the magnetic tubes, because we were discussing a similar idea. If you completely or almost completely remove friction, which you can do by making it a vacuum and using purely magnetic forces, you could send things at much higher speeds for very little energy.
Yeah, that's the
because
point.
You would need the energy to accelerate, and then you could recuperate it while decelerating.
That's the idea.
And you wouldn't lose anything to friction.
And actually, so there's an interesting aspect to this that I've been watching, because the idea of the Hyperloop was an idea by Elon Musk, and I was watching how the whole proposal was released and the ideas were disseminating and stuff like this. And he was actually using the best aspects of the internet to make this idea as good as possible. So what he did was, he announced ahead of time on his blog that he had this idea for a new transportation mechanism that could make continental travel irrelevant. He said, I've come up with the blueprints for this, and he had his team at Tesla go over the blueprints, and he said, I'm just going to tweet this out, and he basically open sourced it. So all of the people that follow Elon Musk on Twitter had the ability to look at the blueprints for the Hyperloop. It's the people who follow Elon Musk on Twitter are non-random. I'm sure there are a lot of good engineers and good physicists and stuff like that who could give a good opinion and feedback on it. He got good feedback on it, and the overwhelming consensus was among engineers and stuff that looked at the Hyperloop blueprint was that it's completely feasible with the technologies we have now. So it's not at all science fiction to think that some medium like this could be implemented on each continent in the 2040s or the 2050s. That's not unreasonable at all. And so it would make the situations, I think, we're all going to start experiencing more, less of a problem. Like for me, I'm collaborating with a few people on a social media site, and they're all across North America. It would be great if we could get together and collaborate more often, but we can't. But with a Hyperloop type of thing, it would make it irrelevant. That's a personal example for me, but everyone could use an example like this. I'm sure there are collaborators that everyone has here that are in other countries in Europe or in North America. It would be nice if we could meet with them for coffee and not worry about the fact that they're in Paris and I'm in Brussels or something like that. Or if I'm...
It's not only a question of moving people, it's moving things, material,
and
food.
Sure. Yeah, of course, and that's another important aspect, and that's something I didn't really talk about, but these transportation mechanisms always help with the facilitation of movement of resources around as well. And that might be more important in the global brain than agents, because like what Clement said, I could just be virtually here instead of physically here in the global brain. It's entirely possible. But unless we had transportation, we can't have it.
What I would like to see the integration of that with the 3D printing. Because with the 3D printing, you don't need to actually get objects there, but you need to get the resources to build the objects. The objects themselves you get the design via the internet, so you just need to transport a relatively small number of basic resources, which means that they could take the form of bottles, basically, like cylinders that you just blow through a tube.
The raw material.
Yeah, that could be very efficient.
I've also heard that with 3D printers, it's just essentially a torrent that you can download, like a torrent blueprint for an iPad or something like that, and you just download the torrent and it print it. I don't know, but that could also make the movement of resources a lot easier and manufacturing decentralized and stuff like that. It sounds crazy, but if you think about in the 1980s, where all our music, our movies, all of our books were all physical, now they're all in torrents, or they all can be in torrents if you want them to be. This could happen again with
We
other
still
things.
have to eat.
We still have to read, yeah.
To eat.
To eat, yeah, we still have to eat, yeah. No, but you can 3D
Raw
print food.
material, pills, whatever you want, but we need to...
Yeah, but you can 3D print food, and they already have 3D printed food. Like you can use cells to print 3D print. Like it doesn't matter what the substrate is.
But you would still need somehow to grow the cell, so you would need some basic material.
Sure. But I mean, I'm just saying 3D printing in terms of its application can be extended to food as well, right? So there's lots of possibilities, and the important thing is that the internet makes all of these possibilities come quicker, because the people creating basically the people creating the future can collaborate a lot easier, a lot better on the internet than they could before, and they can use the incredible knowledge base of the planet to its full potential. Like it doesn't matter if you're an American, you want to build a 3D printer, but you need help on something, and the guy who knows how to do that is in China. It doesn't matter. You can email him. You can have a Skype conversation with him. You get to utilize all the talent. Wherever we are, we can collaborate regardless of geography. And in the global brain, the real death of geography happens. Right? Like the internet is slowly killing geography, but it's not completely dead today. But it should be, I'd imagine.
My second point, actually, in the spirit of applying your theories to practice, have you thought of starting a movement on the internet to help out the poor Greeks that have their universities closed down, because that is something that is very tangible. You can do it today in principle. If a university is closed down and people that need to follow education, follow, I'm pretty sure, courses that overlap with lots of very good universities all over the place, I would be very happy to see a thing like that, because on the internet you can see lots of right-wingers, left-wingers, all kind of wingers that complain about those draconian measures and so on, but I haven't yet seen somebody who comes up and says, well, okay, let them even physically close it down. It's not great. We have the means to help those people out that doesn't cost.
I think it's on the person individually. As long as you have an internet connection, you can sign up to Corsica, or you can sign up to Khan Academy, or you can sign up to all these things individually. It doesn't cost very much to do that. You can take a degree in almost anything you want.
No, but don't you think that it would be nice if officially an institution, let's say the VUB, says, well, the VUB is maybe not the best example, because they are cutting down on courses, I heard recently, in the humanities and history and so on. But let's say other institutions, wouldn't it be nice to see that as a gesture? I mean, it's not that you can't have it. Yes, I agree. You just go out and you look for the topics that you like. I'd love to see, like, well announced and inviting the people that are suffering at this moment. Those
It might well be that a movement community like that.
Well, I hope that
nowadays that things can be done very quickly.
that's exactly what I'm saying.
And I think how institutions adopt to these types of ideas will be the difference between whether they're successful or not. I mean, this is an example of academia, but just take a look at, I don't know if you guys have heard of Blockbuster, but Blockbuster was an American video company, and they were told a few years ago, if you don't have online DVDs offered, you're going to collapse. And they went bankrupt in the span. It was astonishing. Blockbusters were everywhere, and they went bankrupt in a couple of months. And Netflix arose because they had the online DVDs. The same thing could happen with universities, right? Like if you don't start offering more online courses to more people, something like what the Khan Academy does, you could just lose your function. Like it doesn't matter if you're Harvard. It doesn't matter. Like if you lose your function, you lose your function. It doesn't matter how powerful you were in the other system.
Apparently that's a problem for the elite universities in the US, because they ask such high fees. They need a lot of money coming in, and if people can get the same courses via the internet, they are much less inclined to pay those fees. So
and it's a changing type of I think we're going to get a more changing type of credentialism, in a sense, where it doesn't necessarily matter if it says Harvard. It more matters if you can demonstrate that you're excellent in what you know. Like if your level of education, it's more what you know based more than the fact that you had gone to Harvard or if you had gone to Princeton.
Yeah, what they will eventually need to go to is a kind of a universal assessment. That's to say, tests about which everybody could agree. Like if you pass this test with so many degree, you are worth a master's degree in physics, no matter what university or what courses you follow.
Yeah, I think that would be much more beneficial, especially because there are so many problems in the developed world where people from the developing world come here and they have the requisite knowledge, but they have to do the degree all over again or something like that, and then we end up underutilizing their talent, or we end up and it's a big, I paid my way through undergrad by being a security guard, and oftentimes some of the security guards that worked with me were people from the developing world that had a degree in engineering and they couldn't get a job here, and they were just very sad about this, that I have to be a security guard and they have this knowledge. Back at home I was well respected and I loved my profession, but I came here to give my kids a life, and now I can't live to my full potential. So something like you're talking about would be very beneficial, and it would facilitate globalization in a much faster way, in a much better way, because we need to have better standardization for skills. And
standardization in general is very important for lots of things, but the problem is that it's largely political question. There are all kinds of groups that have certain power positions that are not inclined to give them away, and by standardizing they make the field equal for everybody, which means that they lose their privileges. And so, especially countries, for example, countries that have one system will not accept that there is a universal system that applies to all countries, especially if they are powerful countries like the US. Typically, the more powerful the countries, the least they will be inclined to stepping into a universal system like that.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Just a curiosity, you cited Schmidt-Huber on the omega point.
Yeah.
I never saw this in his work. Which publication is that, or what does he say about the omega point?
I think he's discussing it. Like, I don't know if he's advocating for it, but just overview of it.
By the way, we invited Schmidt-Huber to give a seminar here, and so we told him that we normally don't pay fees. We didn't hear from him anymore.
Sorry?
We invited Schmidt-Huber to give a talk here, but when we told him that we normally don't pay fees, he didn't react anymore.
But in my reading, most of the academic discussion on the global brain is like whether it's Peter Russell's understanding of it or yours. It's usually generally viewed as a very positive transition, I found. So like it's usually most of the reaction to it that's negative is coming from non-academics who are assuming that it's going to be like envisioned as like a 1984 super state of some kind. I don't see any of the trends indicating that such a thing will exist. In fact, like the exact opposite. I feel like it might even be impossible for such a thing to exist. I feel like a highly centralized entity looking down on all of us. I don't even know how such a thing could arise. Because like your work it has to be distributed. It has to be, all the agents have to have all their potential maximized, in a sense. So I don't feel like anything like that. Which is also why I feel like I had talking to some of my friends about this, and they always bring up the NSA stuff, like, oh, is the NSA just going to have the ability to like watch all of us and have all our information in a sense? And I don't feel like that's really a possibility either, because if you again look at who the NSA is working for and who's against the NSA, there's one side that's going to have a lot more power in the global brain than the other. Like it's the American government that's controlling the NSA, spying the American government. In my model doesn't exist in the global brain at all. Nothing that centralized exists at all. And the thing that's against the NSA are like very broadly, the internet's against the NSA.
No, I think that there is one big gap in our understanding of this meta-system transition towards a global brain, and is what is going to be the political transformation, because it's obvious that the present political system cannot survive.
That's right.
On the other hand, it's also obvious that the present political system will do everything possible to survive.
Yeah.
And there is no obvious kind of intermediate. So I'm wondering about scenarios where the political system, as you suggested, would kind of become a relic of the past, a bit like the monarchy now.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, something else will start to take its place, and I don't believe, I'm not as optimistic as you as this kind of internet collective opinion can replace it, because collective opinion, I've studied a lot about collective intelligence. It can switch very quickly, and it can be very superficial and pay attention to something because there is a cute picture of a baby bear there, or there is a small child, or something like that, or something else that's much more important, but it's not as cute, doesn't get the intention.
Right.
So we still need some intermediate level.
It would take some sort. Well, I could easily imagine a bunch of academics in, say, the 17th century saying this about the monarchy. Like, what would the intermediate be between a monarchy and the democratic institution? There wasn't an intermediate. they just abolished the monarchy and
No,
set up in the French Revolution.
In the French Revolution, yes, but in most other countries, there were intermediacy. Most other
Yeah, I
countries,
guess
they
so,
kept
yeah.
their monarch, but the
Right.
monarch actually, I mean, England is the best example. I mean,
Right.
England had a pretty powerful monarchs, but they gradually became less and less powerful, and they still are there, but it's
Then
democracy.
there could be something like a president, right? Like, or a prime minister, in the same way that there's a king and a queen, like that have no real power. Like where we have a president that perhaps gets elected, but doesn't necessarily have as much power as the collective
You
opinion.
have that in a number of countries, that you have kind of a president who has kind of the function of a king, a more honorary function, and who just, in the case of elections, when there is no coalition, kind of plays the moderator between the parties.
Like you mean the relationship between the monarchy and the president? Or the relationship between the president and the people?
The relation between the president and the people.
Oh, okay. What country?
Italy,
Oh, Germany? Okay.
Israel.
Where the president doesn't have much power?
Well, the president is kind of a figure like a king in most monarchies, like somebody who is more kind of a figurehead and who plays a moderating role.
Okay.
Who doesn't really make decisions, but whenever the country gets into big trouble and the parties cannot agree, he kind of plays the moderator and, if necessary, calls new elections.
It's not a constitutional power. When there is no constitutional power, he is there to try to get the guys together.
Sorry?
He is not part of the constitutional power.
Okay.
There is no constitutional power, and he is there to talk to.
Okay.
He tries to get everyone together again.
Okay.
It's symbolic in a way, but it lasts very short.
Okay.
Well, in a sense, the European system works a bit like that. We now have a president of the European Union who happens to be a Belgian and who apparently does the work quite well. And he's basically doing that. He's kind of moderating between all the different parties because nothing can be decided in the European Union unless practically all the countries agree about it. So he's basically shuttling between all the different parties and trying to...
He's more coordinated.
Yeah, he's more coordinated,
President of Germany is not
moderator.
coordinated.
So he's not the one who makes the decisions. He's the one who tries to get the others to agree.
Well, that's very different from the president of Germany, for example, in function.
Yeah, the president of Germany is a less active function. That's more
That's what
purely
you're talking
honorary.
about.
Yeah. No, but I mean, in both cases, the president is not the one who
There's no
really makes the
intrinsic power,
decision.
right.
There's
There's
no
no
intrinsic
intrinsic
power.
Yeah.
But I have too many questions, but there are so many brains around me that I didn't dare to ask them.
Sure.
What is your, you said I'm torn between two tendencies. What were they? When you started off your presentations, I'm an evolutionary anthropologist.
Right.
What
So I've always been torn between my interest in evolutionary anthropology and my interest in basically what you'd call as like futurism, or people who try and predict future technologies and integrate these into evolutionary frameworks of some kind. Most evolutionary
the
anthropologists...
systematic aspect of it.
Yeah, and I've never really encountered any evolutionary anthropological thinkers that tried to do something like this, where they integrate human evolution into a larger framework for our system transitions and potential implications for the future. So that's what I tried to do with this.
Yeah, my problem is always, is there human evolution or is there evolution to cool? And what is human in evolution, right? How to distinguish human from evolution, and how to distinguish consciousness from human, how to distinguish consciousness from human, from information, from knowledge.
Right.
And all of a sudden you're at a very basic philosophical concept here.
I guess these are all based on our own definitions of what human is. Like, so what is human, if you ask most evolutionary anthropologists, would be large-brained bipeds, right? And so you get that with the genus Homo. That's what you classify the genus Homo as. It has to have a certain brain-to-body size ratio. It has to be bipedal, and they're lumped into the genus Homo. And what is consciousness and mind? I mean, that's a philosophical discussion that could go on forever. I always say it's something related to self-awareness, knowing you're alive, I don't know how many people would agree or disagree with that, but I've been very interested in, for example, whether chimpanzees or whether gorillas or whether orangutans have a degree of this self-awareness. There have been things like the mirror test that have shown that there are animals that can recognize themselves in a mirror and stuff like that, but it's very basic because they don't really have a communication mechanism or a thought mechanism in their head to communicate abstract thought. So they don't really, I don't think, have shown any evidence that they understand that they're alive or understand what death is to any significant degree. They seem to be upset, for example, like mothers seem to be very upset when an infant dies, where, an example, baboons don't really recognize death at all in that way, so that they recognize death, it happens, but I don't think they internalize it as, okay, like life is finite, I'm going to die one day. I don't think that connection is made, really.
But in your mind, is the global brain anything else but a repository of all PhD level knowledges?
Yeah, I think it's much more than that. Because, well, take for example the example I was giving, where like it could be a case where we're communicating in a qualitatively new way, where we get new experiences, where this presentation isn't just me talking to a group of people, but it's me sharing my actual thoughts with you or something like that. It's just a new qualitative.
If we all knew everything, what would we share?
Right. That's a question I have. Like, if this closes some sort of knowledge feedback loop, then do we become something different? Like, I don't know. I don't know. It just seems like that's the direction it's going. Like, where we could all potentially have all the information. If we all do have all the information, then do we become something different?
It's the same thing as having all the information and using all the information. You never use all the information at the same time because it's computationally undoable.
Yeah.
So every person, even if you would have all the information, will only be focusing on a particular part.
Yeah.
I'm speaking with you, and you speak, and you're focusing on an overlapping part, but not the same as me. We can have a useful conversation because by the overlap, we know what we are talking about, but by the non-overlap, I can tell you, yes, but have you considered that this might actually answer your question that you put there?
Yeah, and it could be that, like, we both have read the same book, or like we have both read the same book, but we disagree about certain aspects of it. Like, we could have both read a lot about consciousness, but we could both talk about consciousness and have disagreements about it.
How could I disagree about something if you're talking about knowledge? How can I disagree about a principle? How can I do that? Right?
Well, I mean there will be facts. I don't think like that there are facts about the universe that I'm sure we both accept, and we don't have to bother arguing about. Like the fact that we have evolved. That we're not going to sit here wasting our time about whether that's happened, but we might both take a look at a series of, or the evidence that's available to us about a specific aspect of evolution, and have some disagreement about what the most likely hypothesis or the most likely theory would be to describe the evolutionary change. Like we could both know the exact same thing and then disagree about what the conclusion is about that series of facts, I think. But I don't know though, like what the deep future of our communication is and the deep future of our interaction is, or if we're mostly technological, is that if that happens, then what beings emerge from that? I don't know. If we have all the knowledge, or it could be wrong, or it could just be that we have just a hyper-educated society, and everyone has a high education, but we don't all have all the information. That could be the case as well.
Right. The problem I have, it's not a problem as such, but
Yeah.
I was there when the first not computer, but almost computer was constructed, right?
Right, yeah.
And I've heard all the promises and all the hopes we had at that.
Yeah.
And today we are where we are, and there's no difference.
There's no difference in
There's no
what?
difference from it. So what's the difference? The world has changed tremendously.
Yeah.
And when I was yesterday, I was in my hometown, and then I saw these beautiful trains with the students going with these beautiful trains. I was on a train with a wood bench, with their laptop, with everything. I mean, it's like a different world.
Right.
Then I said, well, what is different from right now? No different, right? It's technologically different, that's all, right? But intrinsically...
I think more people are educated now.
Yeah, okay.
I
yeah,
think
but
people think differently than they thought in your time.
maybe, but did you have to think differently then? But you have to think differently then. Yeah. You
Yeah,
cannot think then
I'm
the way
sure
you
you
think.
were thinking very differently than, I mean, the people who would do something because the priest on the pulpit told them to do it,
Yeah,
that
okay.
doesn't exist
Okay.
anymore.
I think what you're seeing now, like I guess in my view of how this system behaves, it's again what you experience and what you view in between metasystem transitions is more like almost negligible change. You see gradual change, like a phyletic gradualism type of change, and then it takes a new system, it takes a new energy to get a big rupture in the way the society is structured. So like, you know, if you were at Oxford in 1900, it would be much different than if you were at Oxford in 1600, like the type of, because the new transition had occurred, and it would be completely different in terms of the types of conversations you would be having and the types of things that would be acceptable to talk about. But like in between 1980 and 2010, I mean, people are more educated, people have more access to information. I know I'm a lot smarter than I would be had I been born in a earlier generation. I just have access to more information, right? Just having access to Google and Wikipedia constantly at my fingertips, I can educate myself about far more topics than I would have had access to in the 60s or 70s.
It's not just the amount of knowledge you have access to, IQ has also been increasing.
Yeah, the Flynn effect, yeah.
Nothing has changed, everything has evolved. At a certain point in time, it's all the same again. I mean, that's Nietzsche all the way. It comes back all the time at a different level. I was 1 month ago in Uzbekistan, and I came back and I said, wow, what did we lose? Right, when I came back, I said, how fantastic it is there to live. I wouldn't want to live there because you cannot transpose yourself again in a different culture.
Right.
But there is a radiation of something that we have missed. But if you never had that, then it doesn't exist for you. It's gone forever.
Of course. So like, sort of a thinker I like who thought about this was Ian Morris, who was trying to quantify economic and social progress. But we have to always remember that we can't quantify economic and social progress and correlate it with necessarily like happiness or like experience, right? Like I can't say that I'm happier in 2013 having access to Wikipedia than I would be in 1914 with no access to Wikipedia. Of course, like there's no saying that we'll just for sure all be way happier. Like we could lose things. There are aspects of traditional culture that we might want to keep and we might want to continue to explore, or that I might not choose to experience just because I happen to be born in an information age, right? Like
once you have the basic needs, the Maslow pyramid, once you have this fulfilled, it doesn't matter where you live and what time you live and how you live. Yeah, it's there. It's always there.
Sure.
So give the people these basic needs, whatever they are, and we solve all the problems.
Sure.
I fully agree.
And I think that's what I agree as
We
well.
don't need to go to this extraordinary evolution of energies and systems.
I'm saying this is just going to happen.
It is there.
I agree with you. Like we just need to make sure everyone's basic needs are met. We need to make sure everyone has food, water, shelter. No one should have to want or worry for these things.
All the higher ones, that's where
the higher ones, right?
The higher ones, they're the internet
and that's what we have to solve.
Those are the problems that are most important, for sure. We have to make sure we have to maximize happiness of every consciousness on the planet.
How do we do that?
That should be the, no, but I agree with you that should be the goal. But what I'm saying with all this stuff is that there's just a system process that's happening. Like I didn't choose for the internet to exist, you didn't choose for the internet to exist. I'm not going to choose whether the global brain exists and you won't either. This is happening and this is just the phenomenon but I agree with you. What matters more than anything is individual happiness, consciousness, those things, making sure everyone's basic needs are met.
One more question.
Yeah.
How can you actually explain, even understand remotely what can happen in the Americans, between the Republicans and Democrats today, what can happen because of two not trivial issues, one absolute issue and a trivial issue, right? There is an absolute need for support for people to have medical support, etc. There's an absolute need for that.
Yes.
So you cannot argue with that by saying do this before because that is not important. No. So how can you have this discussion happen at the level of a culture which is the United States in today's age? How can you explain that?
America's a crazy anomaly in the developed world. They're a crazy anomaly. That's another presentation of why America is the way it is. Yeah, they're very strange. There's so many different paradoxes that I see with America. Like, for example, they were the first secular state in the world, and yet they're hyper-religious. Right? I don't know how to explain that either. Some people have said that maybe it's because they privatize their religion, and then that allows people to prey on other people who are disadvantaged more than, say, in the United Kingdom or something like that. But basically, the government's been co-opted by corporate interests. The biggest corporations are in America. They bought the Republican Party. They bought a lot of the Democrats. They want to keep this current system as is, the status quo, because that's where they're getting their money. So the revolution has to come from the bottom up. It can't come from within. Like there's too many. The system has to change.
It has to come and from within.
But there are people changing the system right now. Like there's a movement called Wolfpack that's designed to change the Constitution to get money out of politics. If you get money out of politics, if you change the law to say corporations are not people, corporations cannot buy a politician, then you're going to get more change. You're going to get political parties that are beholden to the people and not to their corporate donors. So I have a lot of faith that project is going to come to full fruition. I don't know when. It could be this decade, it could be next decade, but that has to happen. But there's problems in Canada as well. Like there are a whole bunch of problems with the political system in Canada that I don't like and I'm not happy with. And I'm sure there's the same thing in Brussels, and I'm sure there's the same thing in England. I'm sure there's the same thing in every developed country in the world, that there are problems. We don't necessarily like everything our political system does. But it's miles better than what we would be living in a monarchy, right? Like if you just teleported us all back into a monarchy, I'm sure we would be like, this is hell, right? Like for Christ's sake, like what do we have to deal with here?
You cannot transpose that, but with today's world, how can you have such trivial issues from such intellectuals arguing about such trivial issues and actually blocking the whole world, not the whole world, but the United States, for something which should not be.
Of course, it's mind-boggling that they don't have universal health care. They're an outlier in that respect. All the other developed countries have universal health care. But I can tell you that it's not the American people that they're not universally happy about this fact. Like, again, it's people on the internet that are trying to get the word out about what Obamacare is and what universal health care is and what benefits you can get from it. There are a ton of great videos and great and Obamacare has gone into effect. Right? Like, even though the government shut down, Obamacare has still gone into effect. So it's probably here to stay. Like, once you go to a system that's that gives more people access than previously had access, it's hard to go back. It's hard to restrict that. Like, once you've freed the slaves, you can't go, we'd like to re-slave you. Like, it's hard to go back to a more...
Once it goes out of the bottle, it's out of the bottle.
Yeah, once it's out, it's out. Which is why they try so hard to keep it in the bottle. Right? Because, of course, they know, like, if we give gay people rights, we can't then take them away. Right? Like, or if we give people health care, we can't then take away their health care. Like, we have to make sure they stay in their oppressed state. So, but the transition will happen. Of course, it's an incredible embarrassment. Right? Like, a lot of things that happen in America are just an embarrassment.
And it was not a reflection on America. Like America is just
very good at embarrassing itself.
Yeah, that's great at embarrassment.
We are so far away from
Yeah, and it's, you know what the biggest nightmare or the biggest headache for me has been is, like, growing up, or when I was an undergrad and in grad school, I would be around really intelligent people all the time. I'm talking to really intelligent professors and intelligent grad students, and then I go home at night and I'm listening to Mitt Romney. Right? Like, how do these people have power? It's hard to explain how such a situation could exist, where I'm having such great discussions during the day and I go home and there are these idiots on TV running the goddamn country. It's hard to explain, like, and it's just about money, right? Like, if democracy worked well, it would be about the ideas. Like, if I should be able to run for president if I want to. Of course I couldn't, because I don't have the money to do such a thing. But it should be about the ideas. What's your opinion on social policy? What's your opinion on economic policy? That's what you should run your campaign on. What happens in reality is how much money do you have and how much money do your friends have. And then you can run. It doesn't matter, whatever you believe, it doesn't matter. If you have the money to run the campaign, go for it. You've spent your whole life running a pizza shop like Herman Cain, and you can run for president. You made a lot of money, it's fine. Right? But they're so if that changes, we're going to get a much better system. If we divorce money from politics, it'll be about ideas, and that's what science is. Science is about your ideas. It's not about how much money you have. If I have no money, but if I have good ideas, I have good ideas. If you don't have much money, if you have good ideas, you have good ideas, and that's how politics should be as well. It should be about what works. It should be about what's right. There is right and there is wrong. Yeah, I mean, it gets polarized with left and right, but there is right and there is wrong. There are good ideas and there are bad ideas, I think.
So we need peer-reviewed politics.
Yeah. You know, the great example is PolitiFact. If you guys check that site out, it's a great site, and they fact-check everything politicians say. And so they take a statement from, and this is another example of the internet making it hard for politicians, and YouTube, of course. We can put everything you've ever said on YouTube. So it's much harder to backtrack on a bad campaign promise or backtrack on something ridiculous you said earlier. Or it's much easier to get made fun of, like Herman Cain went out on a political speech where he quoted the Pokemon movie, and that's on YouTube, and like it's a joke, and he gets made fun of about it. But if we didn't have YouTube, we would have forgotten by now that he had quoted Pokemon, right? Like it's just an example, and but like something like PolitiFact, they take every statement and they just fact check it all, and they have a degree, and it depolarizes the politics. It's no longer a left opinion or a right opinion. It's just whether it's true or whether it's false. Are you lying or are you telling the truth? Right? And something like that's great. Something like that.
This morning, a politician of ours said the exact opposite he said last year. When asked, why do you say the opposite, he said, I then believe absolutely what I said, and I believe again today what I believe. The difference is called vooruitschrijvend inzicht, how do you call that? Progressive knowledge, right? He said, I was honest, I believed that 1 year ago, and I am again, so it's totally different. I'm not the fault, it's because I now know about it. I didn't know about it before, so. Knowledge is,
I'm just checking PolitiFacts, and I see they have an Obama meter, and they check all the promises that he made,
promise broken,
promise kept, compromise.
Yeah, it's very good.
It's excellent.
It's a very good site, and they have a pants on fire where you just outright lie, and then you have a count on how many pants on fire you have, and then reporters and anchors can use this resource. You said this, it was just a flat out lie. You said this, it was just a flat out lie, and you can't go back on it. So it's a great resource. It's another tool that has emerged on the internet that can be used to great effect in the future. There are lots of tools on the internet that are emerging. They're in an emergent state, and that their full impact hasn't been realized yet. But their full impact will be realized. It's just a matter, because they're very effective tools. And they're empowering tools. They empower a great more number of people than they benefit a great number of people, so they'll be fulfilled and come to full maturity.